Hey, so wanted to go through the dessert I'm making this Sunday. It's called a pot de crème. What this is, it's basically a thick, rich, velvety custard you can make in a pot. I'm using 4 ounce mason jars, but you can use ramekins if you have those instead. So just to go through the ingredients, I'm using some whipping cream, some homogenized milk. You can use any percentage you wish or you have at your house. Some salt, sugar, eggs. I'm just using the egg yolks. And the last thing we're going to be using is vanilla bean. Now, if you don't have vanilla bean, you can use vanilla extract. And if you don't have vanilla extract, you can omit this. So before we get into the preparation stage, I wanted to highlight the cooking methods that I use or I'm going to be showcasing in today's video. I typically use a sous vide device to cook these. It allows me to cook large batches of them all at once. Plus, it's also a temperature controlled environment, so I'm almost guaranteed to have the exact same results each time. Don't have to worry about dealing with different batches. If you don't have a sous vide, have no fear though. You can use a conventional oven. All you're going to need is a high-walled baking dish, enough to fit the ramekins or jars you're using. You'll fill them up with a bit of water, maybe up to halfway or more, just to keep the moisture content in the oven high as these are cooking to prevent any cracking or any kind of unnecessary dryness in your custard. So now that we've got that out of the way, if you're going to be using an oven, preheat it to 300 degrees before you start your preparation. If you're going to be using a sous vide method, obviously fill the water bath up and preheat your sous vide up to 176 degrees Fahrenheit or 80 degrees Celsius. So let's get into preparation.
You're going to want to start by separating the yolks from the whites. I do this by simply passing the yolk between the two halves of the cracked shell. There's a couple other methods you can try online, but this is the method I find that works best for me. You're going to want to use about 7 to 8 eggs for this. I used about 8 for this recipe, though it really depends on the size of your eggs plus the weight of your egg yolks. Now once you have about 150 grams of egg yolks, you're going to want to take about 75 grams of sugar and add that in. And let's take about 3 grams of salt and add it on top. Now grab a whisk and let's whisk to thoroughly combine all these. Now let's grab a pot, add about 300 grams of heavy cream, and a splash of milk, about 80 grams. Take your vanilla bean pod, cut it in half, and then split it lengthwise. Grab a spoon and then carve out the vanilla beans from inside. Now if you don't have a vanilla bean pod, you can substitute about 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla extract. And if you have neither of those, don't worry, you can omit them both. So let's take the vanilla beans and add it into the cream and milk mixture, and let's bring this up to a simmer just when the cream starts to bubble. Don't forget to add in the husks, still a lot of flavor you want to extract from those. Now once it gets to about between 85 and 95 degrees Celsius, we want to remove it from the heat, remove the husks, and let's add this now into our egg mixture. We want to do this very slowly while constantly whisking the egg mixture to ensure that no hot spots appear and that our eggs don't begin to scramble because of the hot liquid we're pouring in. Now once combined, you're going to want to pass this through a mesh strainer. Now let this rest for about 10 to 15 minutes to get rid of any air bubbles. If you're feeling impatient though, just slam it down on the countertop and let most of the air bubbles rise to the top. Now let's cast it into the jars or ramekins. Do this for all jars or ramekins you have. Let it rest for about 5 to 10 minutes, again to let air bubbles rise. If you're feeling impatient again, slam it on the counter or simply use a burner to remove them. Now, if you're using an oven method, you're going to close the tops of your mason jars, or if you're using ramekins, you're going to want to cover the baking dish with tinfoil after. You're going to take the jars of ramekins, place them in the baking dish, get near boiling water, pour that in to about halfway, and let's bake that at 300 degrees for about 25 to 30 minutes. Now, if you're using a sous vide method, you're going to take the mason jars and close them tight with your fingertips, but not tight enough so that air can still release out in the cooking process. Set those jars aside. Let's grab your sous vide, and let's slowly lower the jars into the water bath. see here, we've got air bubbles escaping from inside the water bath. All right, now that we're done, let's remove it from the oven. Just carefully remove all the jars from the baking dish, and let's set in a cooling rack. Similar process with the sous vide. Remove all the jars from the water bath, and again, set them on a cooling rack and let them rest for about 30 minutes. And then chill in the fridge for 4 hours.